Hello and welcome to another Championing Black Voices segment. My name is Paul Schultz and I'm one of the tenors with Contus. I'm also the communications lead. And we are really thrilled to be joined today by composer, conductor, and music educator, Dr. Christopher Harris. And Dr. Harris is currently serving as the Director of Choral Activities at Arkansas Tech University and is a native of Fort Worth, Texas. Hello, Dr. Harris.
Good morning, how are you?
Doing well. So that first piece we just heard is called Landing Flight, and we programmed it this summer as part of our July Camp Contus. And Dr. Harris, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit about your inspiration for that piece, and then also kind of tell us more about your musical journey.
Okay, so that exact piece holds a very special place in my heart. I actually wrote it, I think, either going into my last year or in my last year at Florida State, completing my doctoral degree. And it was a very challenging time for me. Anyone that's been through graduate school knows oftentimes you're pretty much broke. You don't have a lot of income, and that just makes things hard. I was, applying for jobs, and at that time I had no bites, no real interviews. And so I was like, what am I gonna do with my life? And so the text to that piece really spoke to me. It's by a living composer who's actually one of my closest friends. Her name is Devondra Banks. She is an African-American poet living in Houston. She actually does a lot of things, but one of the things she does really well is write poetry. And in that text, it kind of talks about for every landing, there's flight. And, in every orchard, there's a tree which once was a seed. And it sets up this kind of dichotomy of comparing two things. And I think my favorite comparison is probably, she says, for every, at every shore, there's a wave, and the wave is tossing this vessel, and the wave is crashing and trying to destroy this vessel. But it finally says, but the vessel was made. Like the reason it's so powerful to me is it's talking about all these things that are happening, but the secret is, the vessel is designed specifically to handle all of that. which is kind of where I got my inspiration for Landing Flight. The poem's not called Landing Flight. In fact, I don't think she had a name for the poem, and I struggled immensely trying to find a name. And then I said, okay, you know what? It's just easiest to call it, Landing Flight. So anyway, getting back to in this composition, I think my favorite part is the only time where there is like dominant tonic harmony, a cadential movement. And it's where it says, too brave. And there's this big arrival harmonically. And I think that's kind of the big point in the music. And then it kind of comes back. And then I think my second favorite line is, because it is I, not the storm, who will last. So I'm trying to kind of condense into a small summary this amazing text. Mm-hmm. But you have to kind of read the text for yourself and begin unpacking it for yourself to kind of know what I'm referencing. So the inspiration came because I was going through a really hard time during my doctoral degree. My two mentors are both on sabbatical for two different reasons, and I was just having a hard time. I was doing my dissertation, and it was just challenging. I had some personal issues in my personal life. I had a death in my personal life, and it was just hard. And so I wanted to recognize one of my mentors and his influence on me, which is Dr. Andre Thomas. And so I found this text, and I wanted to compose something as a gift for him. And that's kind of how Landing Flight came to be. I will say that usually I try to write more accessible things than 5, 6, sometimes 7-part DVC, tenor bass music, with crazy high and low ranges. But I actually did not limit myself for this particular project. And what came about was Landing Flight.
Yeah, I think what I'm really curious to hear a little more about too is you referenced some parts of you're doing your doctoral dissertation and working at FSU with Andre Thomas, and can you talk a little bit more about both your musical journey, how you got to where you are now, but also what drives you? What's the inspiration for your art making, both as a composer and a conductor?
Yeah, so when I was going through high school, my senior year, I began to compose. I was always a choir nerd, but I was also equally, if not more, an athlete. I just love playing sports. So I kind of categorized myself as a regular guy. Like, I didn't grow up with the story that I hear a lot of professional musicians tell, which is, I've been taking piano since I was 4 years old. I've been studying voice, or I took violin since I was 3. That was not my story. I did none of that, actually. I just happened to be a product of really stellar, amazing public school music ed programs in Texas. So I knew I liked music, so I studied it in college as an undergrad. I got a music education degree, taught some. I was composing all the while. Eventually went to get my master's at Ithaca College, still composing, but my focus was never composing. I actually never studied composition at all. I got degrees in music ed, and then my master's was in conducting, and then my doctoral degree was in choral music education at Florida State. Again, the whole time I was composing, and a lot of people, you've probably, if you've heard of me, you've probably heard of me in the last couple of years, because though I was composing since 2003, nothing was published until like 2017 or something like that. So things are fairly new. But I think my master's professor, which is Dr. Janet Galvan, probably said it best. She said, "Chris, you compose because you have to." It wasn't a source of income or anything like that. It was just like this unction that I felt, and I would have inspiration, and it wouldn't let me not write whatever it was that I was writing. And every once in a while I would compose because someone would ask for a piece for this, or when I was teaching in my middle school choir, I didn't quite find always the exact pieces that I needed specifically for my boys. And so I would write a piece. And, that kind of took me through all the way through actually to this point. I actually write for my choir today, my college choir, men's, women's, and also mixed music.
Yeah, learning by doing, which I really appreciate too. And the idea that you have to is beautiful. And talking about vocation, that's pretty powerful. we've got another piece that we want to share with you. And this next piece is called My Way Home. And we programmed it this past Christmas as part of Christmas with Contus, which we recorded at the Ordway. And it was as a part of our lessons and carols. And we paired it with a poem by Angela Shannon called Sunday. But I really want, Chris, if you could talk a little bit about the dedication for this piece, which is really important, and set the piece up a little bit for listeners.
Yeah, so this is another really, really special piece. Up to this point in my life, when I composed this, I had never written something that had as much emotional depth and personal connection as this piece did. I was in my master's at Ithaca, and I was approached by a men's a cappella group called Ithaca Capella. They're like rock stars, at least at that time. They were like rock stars at Ithaca. We would go to their concerts, and they would literally have hundreds of people waiting for an hour or two before the concert, just outside. Like, it was amazing. And then the concert would happen, and it would be really entertaining and all this stuff. Well, I actually got to sing with and teach some of these students. Many of them were music education majors or voice majors. And I got to see them in our traditional classical choral scene at Ithaca. So I got to see a different side of them that was different from the traditional, like, pop, R&B a cappella singers. They were doing these arrangements on their concerts, and it was really entertaining with microphones and lighting and smoke and all this stuff. And it was really a thing. But when they asked me to write something, me being me, I wanted to do something different for them. And I couldn't find inspiration. And so I searched for the most organic thing that I was experiencing. And at that time, it was right after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And, I like to write about love in my music. I like to write about beautiful things, but the reality is that a lot of the most impactful, influential things that happen in life are not pretty. They're ugly. They're evil, and how we respond and react to that, I think, oftentimes is what art is about, or should be about, or at least could be about. So I pulled from that. And though my initial inspiration was from this shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, I think that the piece can speak to more than just that. But I'll just tell you my personal intent for the piece, at least. So I think I had ADD when I was a kid. I got in trouble a lot just because I was hyper. I was a really smart kid. Like, I probably got A's on everything, and then like under conduct or discipline, I got like bad marks. And so my point in saying that was I was imagining being this 6 or 7-year-old kid who maybe that morning they didn't do their chores, or they didn't get up in time and didn't finish eating their food, and was taking too long in the shower. And maybe I made my mom late for work or something like that. And maybe our last interaction before I got out of the car was one full of frustration or something like that. So I'm imagining being the 6-year-old kid and getting out of the car and going on with my day. And, my mom at 10 a.m. gets a phone call that your child was, who you just saw, was not only no longer here with us, but died a horrific death. And there were bullets that ripped through his 6-year-old body and ripped through his 6-year-old neck and left him. His final moments on earth were full of fear and pain and all these things. And the last time you saw him, this is my internal dialogue. Last time you saw him, you were frustrated with him, and maybe it wasn't the nicest time. So my point is, the text and inspiration for this piece came because I said, what if I were that kid? Because there is some 6-year-old kid that was killed. And there is some mother who, for the rest of life, will never have true solace, probably ever again. So if God from heaven looked down and said, 6-year-old kid, you have one opportunity to go and speak directly to your mother or to your father, directly to their heart. If you could ensure that they would hear and feel everything that you said, what would you say? And that's how this piece came about. And the text kind of talks about, if you have to weep, I understand that. You can go ahead and weep, but don't weep too long. and weep and mourn me with grace, because I finished my race. My pain is over. I found my way home. The struggles that life can bring, I'm no longer suffering with those things. And there's a personal piece that I was writing to my actual mother, who we both have dealt with different health situations. And so there's a personal connection that we share. One of my closest friends listened to this piece and came to me weeping and was like, hey, man, I've had several people in my life die from Lou Gehrig's disease and from MS and from cancer and struggles. And he said the piece just spoke to him so heavily. So it doesn't have to be about death and about, a 6-year-old being murdered, but that was the initial inspiration for this piece. I wanted to make a comment on that and try to find some, almost a silver lining, try to find some joy, some hope from this amazingly horrific experience that happened at Sandy Hook Elementary.
What a beautiful piece. And I think as performers, the pieces really come alive. And this is something that I really love about music making and art is we get to, when we can understand a composer's intent to this level, it just allows for the performance to come out of you in a different way. And I think, as I'm sure listeners have experienced themselves, as singers or musicians, or casually or professionally, that's when the magic of music and art making really happens. So thank you, Chris, for this beautiful piece. Well, I wanted to pivot a little bit, and one of the things that's really important about our Championing Black series to us here at Contus is it's kind of our way to be anti-racist proactively in our own classical music sphere. And one of the ways we do that is simply by getting to speak with Black artists and hear about their inspiration and their expertise and share their art making. But also we hope that it can be a platform for them to share their lived experiences as Black people in this sphere. And Chris, one of the things that we've talked about over the last few months since we met this summer, is some of these kind of, I don't know if they're hot button questions, but one of the things that was really powerful to me is to hear your reflections on this question: why is diversity important in classical music? And I think you have a great perspective to offer, not only as a conductor and a composer and a music educator, but also as a Black man. So I'd appreciate it if you would expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, we've had some amazing conversations, and let me see if I can not speak for the next 40 minutes about this really passionate and personal topic. So I'll just dive right in, and I hope I don't offend anyone with what I'm about to say, but I feel like we can't address these things and these issues if we don't address them head on. And anything less than that, I think, is not worth the conversation. Unfortunately, we do live in a very racially motivated society and world. I will say, especially in America, there have been things that have kind of highlighted that, good and bad. Well, let me say that. There have been some things that have highlighted racial things. Sometimes it's been for positive ends, and sometimes it's been for negative ends. I would argue that, unfortunately, it's been more for negative, especially here recently. But for example, my Blackness is just, almost coincidental or arbitrary. Like, when I'm not a Black composer, I'm a composer who happens to be Black. And I'm a musician who happens to be a Black person. And that shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. And as long as it is a thing, then I think that it is our job as human beings. It's our job to take whatever our platform is and to try to correct something that I think desperately needs some correction. I think if I'm going to take a more optimistic view of this, and I'm going to say that I think that what has happened, I think has happened without there being ill intent. And let me see if I can unpack that statement. I don't think people, for example, program white composers and say, I'm just going to program white composers. I honestly have never met a person in my entire life that has done that, in my experience. And I remember I was just telling my students the other day when I was growing up, I remember seeing really slim and really athletic, quote unquote, bikini, beach body white women with blonde hair and blue eyes or green eyes. And I remember thinking as a child, after I saw those kinds of images so much, that was the standard of beauty. So whenever I saw someone that didn't fit that mold, all of a sudden they were not beautiful to me. And I remember thinking when I would see larger people, larger individuals, that I remember questioning and asking my mom, like, why isn't that person considered beautiful? Or why is that person not in this role? I remember distinctly asking my mom, like, why are all these leading actresses and actors all like either really muscular or really, skinny, slim, petite people, and almost always white? And so my point was the standard that we are being shown for whatever reason, is, in my opinion, in America, whiteness, whether it's intentional or not. And then it's, if I can keep unpacking it, it's heterosexualness, and then it's Christianity with a little c, because Christianity with the big C will look different than what we're trying to label it. So anything that wasn't one of those three things ends up being the other, and that's the danger. So what am I saying? If I can just speak very openly, I do get frustrated when I'm made to feel like a token. When I'm talking to composers or to conductors, or I'm looking at conductors' programs, or I'm just witnessing these conversations that we have at conferences, and I do get frustrated and offended and feel some kind of way, because too frequently I think that people will just throw a Black person in their concert program and say that we've done it. I programmed diversely. I addressed the social justice issue. Like, well, you really didn't, because you programmed Decorah, Eric Whitacre, Morton Lauritsen, Randall Thompson, Johannes Brahms, Mozart, and now you want to circle back and now find a Black person and compose something that compose something and throw it in there and think you've done your job. Like, no, you should have considered Undine Smith Moore, R. Nathaniel Dett, Brittany Boykin, William Dawson, all these people along with them, but it was an afterthought, which is a little offensive. But I think that it comes because we have allowed the standard to be what it is. And now we have to address that head on, which means we have to go, in my opinion, kind of out of our ways to recorrect what has happened, which means, yeah, I think we should be programming concerts of women intentionally. We should be programming concerts of black folks and of Latinos and of all those underrepresented populations, because for so long we either intentionally or unintentionally overlooked them, and publishing companies didn't help, because the people that they are, which I know it's a business, I understand, but oftentimes the people that they are publicizing and the composers that they're whose works that they're publishing are not representative of the whole. Or you get that one person, that one token who happened to make it. You get your Moses Hogan, and then everyone does Moses Hogan and thinks that they've done the job. Well, it's more than that. So now that I've said all this stuff, I think that it is important, if I can circle back, that we use whatever our platforms are to address these social justice issues, because I think that humanity is not made better if we continue to avoid these hard topics and continue to avoid these hard issues. I think that you'd be pretty hard to find an intelligent, well-studied, well-educated person that would say that race is not an issue in America, and that racial minorities have not suffered some sort of injustice. I think that people that share that thought are just uninformed and ignorant at best. That's the best thing I can say for them, is you're ignorant, because everything else I would say is not nice. So I think that it is our jobs. It's our jobs to now make sure that those underrepresented people are no longer underrepresented, because it is not the quality of their work that makes them less than. It is too frequently the fact that they were not a part of that initial standard that I was talking about, that standard of whiteness, and if I can be really just blunt, white maleness, straight white maleness, and then Christian straight white maleness. And if you're anything other than that, you probably find that you probably don't know a lot of composers from that, or singers or musicians that have risen to the rank of their straight white male counterparts. And you see that throughout all of society. It's not just a music thing. You see that in the corporate world. You see that with CEOs. You see that with business owners. You see that with pastors. You see that with all these in all these parts of our society. And I think that whatever our platform is, whether it is as a hiring committee at a university, or whether it is as musicians that are singing or programming music, performing music, that we do our parts. I just said an awful lot, Paul, and I hope I don't even remember what your initial question was. I hope I addressed it.
No, it was really beautiful, and I think I can speak for myself. You know, some of these events that have really brought issues of equity and racial justice to the top of my mind, and I know to conversations we have at Contus. These events that have happened recently, sometimes you get into these thought patterns of, like, I see all this is happening, and I see that things aren't right, but what can I do? And so I think I really appreciate that you lay that out for us so eloquently. So I really, really appreciate that. And I wanted to say really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of Contus, the other artists and the staff and the board. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for being a part of this segment. And thank you for your beautiful music, which we have had the pleasure to perform and will be performing in the future. And yeah, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And we've got one more piece. This one I think is probably my personal favorite, and more because I just really loved singing it. And maybe part of that is I got to park it in tenor 2 land, which is always comfortable. But we are actually have not released it yet. This is going to be a preview from a show that will be coming out in April called Fields of Wonder. And this piece is called I Would Live in Your Love, and it's a beautiful setting of Sarah Teasdale's poetry. And Chris, would you be able to give us a little setup on the way out here?
Yeah, so I'm already smiling because I remember this piece is from a set of 5, or I think it's a set of 6 now, poems by Sarah Teasdale that they outline the process of love, roughly. And this particular piece in the set comes after the SSA setting, and what she says, I shouldn't gender that. But what the treble choir says is, they came to tell your thoughts to me. They told me all your thoughts, and they lined them out one by one. And it was funny because I laughed when they were done, because I knew all your thoughts all so well. And they didn't realize that it was your thoughts that made me love you more. And then in response to that, the tenor basses come and say, I would live in your love, and I would live in that love. Mm-hmm. And so when I first composed this set, it was for a professional choir for the Houston Master Singers. And most of the work is mixed, but there's one treble piece and one tenor bass piece. And this is the tenor bass piece. And it's for professional voices. So I got to kind of explore a more difficult setting than making it, extra accessible. So, but I just had such an amazing time writing it, because I was in love myself at that time, madly in love. And I was just trying to convey with my harmonic palette and with these texts and with marrying these wonderful words with whatever I offer musically into whatever end product. And so I Would Live in Your Love is the piece that came together for tenor bass voices. And I just love the words. They're so, Sarah Teasdale's words are so, in my opinion, there's a simple and direct quality to them, but they're so profound and poignant. And I remember reading her words and saying, that's exactly what I feel. I would live in your love. Oh, so she kind of sets up this idea of sacrificing yourself for the sake of the other, which I find is like a tenet of love. If you love someone, you find that it's easier to sacrifice parts of yourself for them. And she sets that up in the text, which was so moving to me. She says, I would empty my soul of its own dreams. I would beat with your heart. I would follow your soul where it leads. And man, it's all these amazingly beautiful ideas that we don't always get to sing. And at least in this particular piece, I wanted to find something that spoke directly to our experiences as human beings in love. And I think that her words capture that very well. So hopefully that addressed what you wanted me to address.
I would live in your love as the sea grasses live by the sea. By each wave as it passes, drawn down by each wave that receives.